This is CBC Vancouver News.
New fears about new rules.
So I'm not a scofflaw. I don't shirk the law. I'm following all the rules, paying all the taxes.
Ultimately, our goal is to get more housing back into the housing market for people to be able to rent.
Some Airbnb hosts in BC worry updated short-term rental regulations could crater their investments. Plus, deadly crash. A pedestrian is killed after a car runs into a store in Vancouver's downtown east side. And tentative deal. Teaching support staff at SFU reach an agreement with the university.
Even though the strike is over, the consequences aren't.
But some students want tuition refunds for canceled classes. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Janella Hamilton. Some Airbnb hosts in BC say they feel stunned by the province's recently announced short-term rental regulations. The legislation is meant to target property owners with multiple units listed on rental platforms. As John Hernandez reports, some fear their investment is about to take a big hit.
I do not think this is the right way to do it, and it's going to have a lot of unintended consequences.
Victoria's Deborah Sheets fears her investment is going to cost her big. Earlier this year, she spent more than $400,000 on a micro suite she lists on Airbnb.
I've put all my savings into my unit. I'm following all the rules, paying all the taxes, buying the business license.
Sheets says it supplements her retirement income, but she fears that revenue stream will dry up. On Monday, the province outlined impending rules to regulate short-term rentals. Hosts will only be allowed to list their primary residence.
Ultimately, our goal is to get more housing back into the housing market for people to be able to rent.
The province says the goal is to target owners who list multiple units, but those who bank on just one feel like they're innocent bystanders.
It's going to decrease the value of our property, and we're not going to be able to find anyone who wants to rent it at a price, a long-term rental that would be able to afford the cost to cover our mortgage.
These are units that were originally designed and intended for young and new households.
This housing policy expert says the short-term rental market has given investors unrealistic expectations.
This is something that I think is really a busted bet on real estate, on residential real estate, and that residential real estate is not commercial property.
And renters have paid the price. Research from McGill University shows short-term rentals in markets like Victoria and Vancouver have brought vacancy rates down by a full %, while increasing rents by about $50 a month.
Which sounds like a small amount, but they ultimately have cumulative effects for renters who are already challenged in this province.
Still, small-scale operators contend they're filling a need.
We charge half the rates that hotels charge, about on average, I would say. There are a lot of people operating short-term rentals without following the laws, and those need to be cracked down on. Maybe they need to restrict the number of short-term rentals, but to treat us all as if we're one uniform entity just isn't the case.
The new rules are expected to roll out in stages next year, starting May 1st. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
A rally in support of Palestinians caught in the brutal fighting in Gaza and Israel took place in Vancouver earlier tonight. Some who were gathering are calling out local leaders. Our Liam Britton was also at the rally.
You can see behind me several hundred people are here at City Hall this evening for a rally in support of the Palestinian cause in the face of renewed fighting in the Middle East. Organizers are a number of groups. Signs are highlighting the higher death toll on the Palestinian side in this most recent fighting, including children, calling them the forgotten victims. Signs also demanding an end to the siege in Gaza, an end to what they call the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories, and what they term genocide in the Palestinian territories. The mood here is very calm for what is obviously a very serious and somber situation on the world stage. Lots of police, but no incidents really happening here. This isn't the first rally in support of an independent Palestine in Vancouver, but this one has kind of a distinctly local message calling out local officials' response to this latest fighting, specifically calling out Mayor Ken Sim for what they call his support of Zionism and, quote, complete complicity and support of genocide in Palestine. Now, the mayor has issued statements in support of Israel and spoke at a pro-Israeli rally last week, but also has made appearances at a mosque where messages of support for civilians on both sides were made. We've asked the mayor for comment on today's rally, but have not received an immediate response back from him. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
Following tonight's rally, the group of demonstrators made its way into the street, obstructing several blocks north of City Hall. Vancouver police say the group then moved to the Cambie Bridge, blocking northbound traffic for about a half an hour before heading back to City Hall and dispersing. Police say traffic is no longer being impacted. 2 lawsuits involving allegations of child abuse by the same Catholic organization are nearing an end on opposite sides of the country. For a group of survivors in Newfoundland, it's been 24 years in the making. Here in Vancouver, a much different approach is taking shape, one that could put survivors front and center. Ryan Cook has more from St. John's.
It's been 3 years since former students of 2 Catholic boys' schools in BC started coming forward. With more than 100 former students now involved, it appears their class action lawsuit is coming to a close. A lawyer for the students says negotiations are ongoing for a process to settle the case outside of court.
There will have to be still full disclosure of evidence as to what happened, what the schools knew about the abuse by the Christian Brothers, what measures they took or didn't take to prevent it.
Both Vancouver College and St. Thomas More Collegiate say they want to go to a mediator. They say it's an important step for truth and reconciliation. The schools were staffed in part by 6 men transferred from the Mount Cashel Orphanage between 1975 and 1981. All 6 were later convicted for abusing kids at the notorious St. John's Orphanage. It's alleged they continued to hurt kids in British Columbia. If the Vancouver case is wrapping soon, it'll be in stark contrast to the Mount Cashel civil case, which has been ongoing for 24 years. Survivors expect to start getting paid soon, but it's been a long wait, and not everyone has made it. This man, John Doe, 26, told CBC News in 2020 that he hoped to live to see the end of the case. He died a year later. Joe Fiorante says they want to avoid a similar fate.
Those gentlemen there have been through many trials, many bankruptcy claims, and are still seeking civil justice, 50 years later, 60 years later. And that's something that's weighing very heavily on us.
Consider the case of Sean Monroe, a man who died 1 year ago this week. He told his family he was abused at Vancouver College and that he couldn't get over it. He died of complications related to alcoholism. The Vancouver survivors say they don't want to lose anyone else during this process. The schools say if all goes well, barring any delays, they should be able to reach a settlement by year-end. Ryan Cook, CBC News, St. John's.
Work stoppages at SFU are over for now. Striking teaching assistants and the university have reached a tentative agreement after 3 weeks of job action. But the fight is not over for some students at the school. As Michelle Morton reports, some undergrads want a break on their tuition for canceled classes.
Even though the strike is over, the consequences aren't.
Adriana Cumming-Teicher is part of a group of undergraduate students who started a petition in solidarity with the TSSU, demanding the university provide a tuition refund for classes canceled due to the work stoppage.
We have not been getting the quality of education that we have paid for.
The SFU Faculty Association let its members know ahead of the strike those who did not want to cross the picket line should avoid holding any classes, warning the university may deduct some salary for work missed. CBC News was at the SFU Burnaby campus on Wednesday, the day before the tentative deal was reached, and heard from students about how the job action has affected them.
It definitely has. I'm an undergrad, so my tutorials and labs are canceled, and I don't have a lot of valuable teaching time, and some of my assignments have been delayed or canceled.
I feel a little bummed out because I'm a first year here, and I don't get to enjoy quality education.
Cumming-Teicher says as of Thursday afternoon, the petition has garnered more than 2,600 signatures.
We need to get those students the education they're paying for, to be able to thrive in the university environment. And frankly, because they're not going to get that, they deserve to be repaid.
A spokesperson for SFU says in a statement, in part, "We recognize that the strike action has disrupted the academic experience for our students this term, and for that we are very sorry." The university also says it will be making other grading and course completion options available to students who have had their learning disrupted. Michelle Morton, CBC News, Vancouver.
A pedestrian has been killed after a car jumped the curb in the downtown east side today. Vancouver police say 2 vehicles collided in the middle of Columbia Street and East Hastings. A person on the sidewalk was killed when one car jumped the curb and then crashed into the Van City corner store.
And the next thing, like I heard out of my ear, was bang, and I looked and whoa, everyone was like, whoa, you know.
It is still not clear what caused the crash. Police say both drivers stayed at the scene. The next phase of the Massey tunnel replacement project has begun. Here's a rendering of a new 8-lane underwater tube tunnel that the BC government wants to replace the current tunnel. The province says it will improve travel for people along Highway 99 between Richmond and Delta, long a slow bottleneck for many commuters for decades. The Transportation Ministry says 3 bid teams have been invited to submit proposals for the design of the project. It's expected that the team will be on board this spring. The new tunnel, though, not set to be finished until 2030. Every year, people in this province take part in the Great British Columbia Shakeout, and MLAs in Victoria joined in today, pausing their work for a practice quake safety drill. At 10:19 this morning, a loudspeaker announcement rang out in the BC legislature to drop, cover, and hold on. Earthquakes Canada says BC is the most seismically active area of the country and the site of thousands of minor earthquakes each year. Here in Vancouver, schools and businesses held drills as well. With a large earthquake being inevitable at some point, a number of BC agencies have invested in developing technology that will hopefully give us a few extra minutes to cover. Renee Filippone has more.
All right, so this is what it feels like to be in a magnitude 8 earthquake. It is shaking really hard. This is an earthquake simulator called the Quake Cottage, and it's part of the Great Shakeout. It is a global earthquake drill. Millions of people participating today so they can be prepared. The message is when you see or you feel the earth shake, you're supposed to drop, cover, and hold to protect yourself.
We want to build some muscle memory. We want to be able to immediately drop to the ground when we feel the earth shaking, cover our heads, get underneath a sturdy object like a table if you can, wait for 60 seconds after the ground stops shaking, then you feel safe to leave, you can do that.
Now, if you live in British Columbia, the message has always been it's not a matter of if, but when there will be a major earthquake. So there is new technology now that can give people a heads up so they can know before the major shaking begins. They're called earthquake early warning systems. One has been developed by Ocean Networks Canada. They have sensors in the ocean and along the south coast. And what they can do is they can detect what's called the primary wave. It's the initial energy coming from the earthquake, which happens before the big shaking begins. And that could give people 30, 60 seconds more of a warning so they can do what they need to do to stay safe. Now, they have some major infrastructure partners they're working with, companies like TransLink, airports, hospitals, to let them know that a major earthquake is going to happen so they can take action to prevent deaths. Now, later on in the spring, the federal government is also releasing its own warning system, and that is going to go direct to your phone in the event of a major earthquake, just like an Amber Alert. It would give you a heads up so you can do what you need to do to protect yourself. And again, that's drop, cover, and hold. Renee Filippone, CBC News, Abbotsford, BC.
Coming up, how one BC Mountie is trying to recruit Indigenous police officers and why it's important to bring change. Stay with us. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream. For several years now, Alberta has been facing droughts that are threatening farmers and their animals. Members of the province's livestock industry gathered in Lethbridge for the Alberta Livestock Expo. Osei has more on how they're adapting.
3,500, Water is a necessary element for life and farming.
When an animal has a higher quality water, they're going to drink more. When they drink more, they're going to eat more. When they eat more, they're going to do better, right?
But with consecutive years of drought conditions across Alberta, it can be hard to come by.
Water quality is important, but more important than water quality is water availability. You're better to have some shitty water than no water, right?
Livestock farming is water intensive. Experts say one dairy cow can drink up to 160 liters of water on a hot summer day.
And that's why we have to really look at our methodologies of treating water, maintaining good water levels, high quality water, and of reusing water again too, wherever we can. Because water is becoming a scarce commodity.
Farmers are finding innovative ways to conserve their water.
In some cases, they're actually dewatering manure, taking the water out of manure, filtering it, treating it, and putting it back into the system for usages such as irrigation.
The amount of water available can affect the taste and quality of the milk and meat produced by livestock. Dry growing seasons can also mean low quality and quantity yields for grains like barley and wheat needed for feed.
The price increases when there is not availability of those different grains and other products that we use.
The cost of feed has risen by up to 30% in some cases, thanks to droughts and events like the war in Ukraine. But the work of water conservation is not just for farmers.
I think even from the general public standpoint, we all have to look at trying to conserve water or reuse water.
Osei Arete, CBC News, Lethbridge.
She's on the front lines of trying to bring change to policing in this country. Corporal Rebecca Monroe hails from the Lytton First Nation. Radio Canada's Alex Lemick met Monroe. She told him about her motivations and ambitions for the RCMP.
When it comes to her identity, Rebecca Monroe says being an Indigenous person always comes first. She is originally from the Lytton First Nation and has been with the BC RCMP Indigenous Policing Services for 12 years.
As an Indigenous woman in the RCMP, I do carry a heavy responsibility because I am a minority in a variety of ways. I joined the RCMP to work in Indigenous communities, so having that reason why really helps me fulfill my commitment to ensuring that Indigenous communities are kept safe.
The overrepresentation of Indigenous people in Canada's justice system is one of the reasons that pushed Monroe into policing.
Part of my motivation to join the RCMP was to help my people and my community, my Inlakupma community. I come from Indian residential school survivors. So my grandparents, my parents went to residential school in Lytton at the St. George's Indian Residential School. And I saw the hurt and the trauma, and saw how they were have been treated in various parts of the justice system.
The First Nations and Inuit Policing Program was created in 1991. It is managed by Public Safety Canada and funded by federal, provincial and territorial government. Its goal, among other things, is to provide culturally responsive policing in First Nations and Inuit communities. Monroe says the RCMP needs more Indigenous officers.
I have spent my entire career recruiting and looking for those members. Officially now, I am an Indigenous recruiter, so that is my substantive role. My everyday motivation is just looking at our communities and looking at the young people and thinking about the difference I'm making to help change that relationship that the police have been viewed in the past.
Despite these goals, Indigenous policing programs are still not considered essential services. Alex Lamick, CBC News, Surrey.
Earlier tonight, we spoke with a former Mountie and leader with Métis Nation BC. He's explained why he believes it's important for Indigenous people to be part of a police force.
It's learning to be a servant and working with people. And I think it is a good time for Indigenous people to come into the RCMP and really be open-minded in how they can make change. And also look up to people like myself as elders or seniors, and as a senior police officer, and look for direction.
This was the beautiful sunset over the water this evening at Memorial Park in White Rock. Darius Madavi will have our full forecast coming up next.
The church that you see behind me is almost 100 years old. It was built in 1931, and it's about to be completely changed inside.
Half of the church will be turned into a cold room, the other half into a packaging room.
We will also have a greenhouse, one interior greenhouse that will be, as you see behind me, that will be the heart of the church. That's for the interior greenhouse. And outside, we will have the exterior greenhouse.
The idea was the brainchild of Jean Champagne. He says he got the idea during a family dinner early in the pandemic. He was talking about the rising cost of food with his daughter.
She told us, if you want to help people, the best thing to do is to have fresh vegetable for the poor people.
So he launched Cultiver pour Partager. The nonprofit grows food and collects vegetables that would otherwise go to waste, donating its harvest to the local food bank, Moisson Beauce. It was when the group started looking for a place to store its produce that Champagne learned the church in Saint-Alfred was up for sale. It needs some repairs. The first step is to reinforce the floor so it can sustain the weight of a forklift.
Fait qu'ici, on a vraiment une partie des récoltes de Cultiver pour Partager.
Champagne's daughter Marie is the general manager of Moisson Beauce. The food bank will rent the cold room, allowing it to double its storage capacity and distribute fresh produce year-round.
On a tellement une forte augmentation de la demande que ce qui rentre sort très rapidement.
Cultiver pour Partager acquired the church for a symbolic amount of $1. The church says it wanted to sell it to a group that reflects its values.
Même si ça rapportait pas au niveau monétaire, à l'église, on a choisi de le laisser aller pour la communauté.
Renovations will start next month. Champagne says the goal is to be ready for the next harvest. Emily Warren, CBC News, Saint-Alfred.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Celebrate the achievement and resilience of women in the workforce with CBC's Michelle Elliott on November 21st at the annual Dress for Success Luncheon. Get tickets and learn more at successluncheon.ca. And stay on top of what's happening where you live with our weekly newsletter. Subscribe today for special programming series, events, and contests at cbc.ca/Vancouver Inbox.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace. To cool and clean the air in your home, call Direct Buy Furnace. Installing Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Darius Madavi joins us now with a look at our full forecast. Darius, we've been seeing a lot of heavy rain lately. Are we going to see more of that?
Looks like this is the worst of it that we've already been through, and now we can see this atmospheric river. This is 2 days ago, streaming its way, bringing all that moisture to us on the coast. Now, earlier today, it has now faded and gone further down the coast, and now it's going to recede from now on. And so we have really seen the last of this moisture. Maybe some remnant showers still sticking around, but really the worst of it is behind us. So just to recap, Monday, some significant rainfall, mostly centered around the sort of Tofino to Ucluelet area on the central west coast. By Tuesday, that's shifted a little bit further south, really around Ucluelet, getting well over 100 millimeters of rainfall, but also much of the west coast. And then here's our new update from yesterday. Again, west coast getting a significant amount of rainfall, but also a lot of it making its way over the island and into the Sunshine Coast, even down in West Vancouver, getting some fairly significant rainfall. But just how much? Well, over those 3 days, from Tuesday to earlier this morning, we saw well over 200 millimeters, which is what the rainfall warnings were estimating. 267 at the weather station near Ucluelet, 206 near Tofino, and then even the west coast of the island, some places like Bowser, seeing 96 millimeters of rain, very unusual for the area being in that rain shadow. And then if we were to, on the mainland as well, up to Whistler, 72 millimeters, Squamish, 106. On the mainland, the most we got was 148 here in Port Mellon. And if we zoom in to Vancouver, even West Vancouver, over 100 millimeters of rainfall in that sort of just over 48 hours of time. So some incredibly significant rain coming, that atmospheric river, first one of the season, bringing quite a bit of moisture. But as we look ahead, that's pretty much the end of it. Not much more rain coming. Any rain that we do see just going to sort of pop up, drop a little scattered shower, which is possible in some places tomorrow. And then that's really the end of it. I should also mention we did see some significant rainfall around Revelstoke and Golden, up to around 70 millimeters in Revelstoke. But short-lived once again, we seem to have gotten through that system that moved through as well, separate from the atmospheric river. Now, here in Vancouver, low chance of some showers once again popping up tomorrow morning, and then just some cloud, hopefully some sun poking through this weekend before potentially the next system moves in next week.
Thanks so much, Darius.
Thank you.
Well, if you like fungi, this Sunday, Van Dusen Botanical Gardens will be bursting with mushrooms for the Vancouver Mycological Society's 42nd annual mushroom show. Paul Kroger is a founding member of the mushroom group. He spoke to Michelle Elliott on BC Today.
There is a mushroom in Haida Gwaii that I misidentified many, many times as a European species, and called Cortinarius lemonius as a European, and then they named it after me, Cortinarius krugeri, because I misidentified it more than anybody else.
Okay, and so what did you learn about it then?
Oh, it's quite fascinating. It appears to be almost exclusively confined to Haida Gwaii so far.
Wow.
And it's now going to be on the BC and Canadian species at risk list of orange ranked species of concern.
That is your late news for this Thursday. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. For news anytime, visit our website, cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is on the early edition on CBC Radio 1. That starts tomorrow morning at 5:30. Have a great night.